Hello. Wahaha. Welcome to The Mermaid and the Simpleton by Barbara Leonie Picard. This is a relatively new fairy tale. It was written in 1949. So all the other ones we've been reading are hundreds of years old, maybe even longer than that. It's been around for a long time. This is a new story. Written before I was born, but still new comparatively. Barbara Leonie Picard is from England. During World War II, she worked as a librarian, and then at night, her job was to go up and sit on top of the library with binoculars to look for bombers coming from the war. So she's kind of like librarian fairy tale writing hero. So this is from a book of a collection that she wrote, The Mermaid and the Simpleton. One day, while he was fishing in the sea, a fisherman caught a mermaid in his net. He had thought that she was some kind of large fish, and had a great struggle to drag her into his boat, urged on by the thought of the price at which so large a fish might sell. But at last, when he could look at his prize properly, he saw the mermaid lying at the bottom of his boat, entangled in the net, and still making vain attempts to free herself from its meshes. "Well," said the fisherman, 17 years have I worked at my trade, and never have I caught anything so strange." She raised tear-filled eyes to him. "I am a mermaid. Please let me go. I am young and very frightened. Please throw me back into the sea." "By all means," said the fisherman, "but first I must take you home with me to show my wife. She always complains that I never catch anything wonderful. A fish with a golden ring inside it, like the one in the story, or a sea serpent, or even an octopus. But now that I have caught you, I can silence her complaining forever. If I but show you to her tonight, tomorrow I will bring you back with me and return you to the sea." So the fisherman carried the mermaid, wrapped up in his net, home to his little cottage near the sea, and showed her to his wife. The woman was delighted. She praised her husband for his cleverness in catching such a creature, and could not leave off staring at the little mermaid and touching her to make sure that she was quite real. She stroked her scaly tail and pulled her blue hair, and enviously eyed the red coral necklace around her white throat. "This is horrible," thought the mermaid, "but it will not last forever. Tomorrow morning I shall be back in the sea, and this will all have been an ugly dream." But later that evening, as the fisherman and his wife were sitting at supper, still talking of the mermaid, a rogue passed the cottage on his way to make a fortune, and knocking at the door he asked shelter for the night. A rogue is a bad person, a person who is up to no good. He was made very welcome, and naturally he was told about the fisherman's adventure and had shown the mermaid. As soon as he saw her, his eyes glittered greedily, and he thought, "I must have her. To a clever fellow like myself, she would be worth her weight in gold." So when he had duly admired the fisherman's skill in catching strange creatures, he asked, "What will you do with her?" "Why," said the fisherman, "put her back in the sea tomorrow. It is to the sea that she belongs." "Then you're not thinking of keeping her?" asked the rogue. "Indeed, no," laughed the fisherman. "What should we do with a mermaid in the cottage?" "In that case," said the rogue, "since I have a fancy to own so strange a creature, I will buy her from you." "No," replied the fisherman, "she is not for sale. I promised to return her to the sea tomorrow, and I must keep my word. I will give you 5 golden crowns for her." Crowns are a kind of coin. The fisherman hesitated. Then he said, "A promise is a promise. I will not sell her." "You fool," whispered his wife. "Sell her to him, but ask more than 5 crowns." But the fisherman shook his head. "No," he said. "I will give you 10 golden crowns," said the rogue, "and that is a lot of money." "It is indeed," said the fisherman, and he thought, "it is more than I could earn in 6 months by fishing." "We are poor, and it is a fair price," whispered his wife. "Accept it, man." But the fisherman said nothing. "Come," said the woman, "you cannot refuse 10 golden crowns." And when he still did not answer, she turned to the rogue. "We accept your price," she said. 10 golden crowns for her, but without the coral necklace. That would be a crown the more." The rogue laughed. "You may keep your necklace," he said, and with eager fingers she dragged it from the mermaid's neck and set it around her own, and ran to admire her reflection in a polished copper pan that hung upon the wall. And the rogue smiled to himself as he counted 10 golden crowns out onto the table. But the fisherman spoke to neither of them. He went out of the cottage and walked up and down in the darkness outside, his hands clasped behind his back. "What have I done?" he said to himself. "What have I done?" The next morning the mermaid was put into a sack, which the rogue slung over his shoulder, and well pleased with himself, he went on his way. At the nearest town he sought out a carpenter, who made at his request a wooden cage large enough to hold the mermaid. Then the rogue bought a donkey and a little cart and a dark cloth to cover the cage, and set off to make some money. He would stop at every town and village on his way and charge 1 silver penny for a sight of the mermaid, and on fair days and market days he made a great deal of money. In a cottage just outside a small town lived a poor widow and her only son. The widow was always cleaning and cooking and polishing and mending, but her son was a simple, idle youth, who liked nothing better than to lie in the fields and gaze up at the clouds, or to sit on a gate and swing his legs and whistle, or to stroll along the road singing to himself. Indeed, he whistled and sang as merrily and prettily as any bird. "You are a lazy, good-for-nothing fellow," said his mother. "You are a disgrace to the family. I am glad that your poor father never lived to see what his only child grew up to be. Here I am working my fingers to the bone all day, and you idle the time away." "Nobody asks you to work so hard, mother," said the simpleton. "What is the good of work, anyway? You sweep the floor, and the dust comes down in the night, and tomorrow you have to sweep it up again." You might not mind living in a pigsty," said his mother, "but what would the neighbors think?" "You spend an hour preparing a meal which is eaten in 10 minutes," said the simpleton. "Would it not be better to eat nuts like the squirrels and fruit like the blackbirds, and have more time to spare for singing and laughing and being happy?" "I am ashamed of you," said his mother, "wanting to live like an animal. The sooner you make up your mind to find a useful trade, the better." "But what is the use of work, mother? Tell me that." "Why, to earn money, of course." "Ah, for money. Now I understand," said the simpleton, for he had often heard his mother talk of money. "But all the same, I do very well without money." "You are impossible," snapped his mother. "But mark my words, such a lazy fellow can only come to a bad end." Everyone blamed the simpleton for his laziness. "I am deeply grieved," said the parish priest, "to see that you do not mend your ways. Idleness is a great sin, and industry is a great virtue." Industry means you work really hard. "I warn you, young man, idleness will bring you to disaster." "Will it indeed, sir?" asked the simpleton. But still he did no work. One fine morning in late summer, as the simpleton was walking along, he found a silver penny lying in the road. "Ah," he said, "here is a find. I shall go to town and spend it." As he strolled round the streets wondering what to buy, he saw a crowd collected round a donkey cart. On the cart was something covered by a cloth, and beside it stood a man. Come up, good people," he shouted. "Only a silver penny to see the mermaid, a real live mermaid from the sea. No other wonder like it in the land. Only a silver penny." "Now," said the simpleton to himself, "that would be a thing to see. I've heard of mermaids, but I've never thought to see one." And he joined the crowd and paid his silver penny to the rogue. Then the rogue whipped the cloth off the cage, and there inside it was the little mermaid. The crowd pressed round, laughing and jeering, and those who were nearest the cart poked her through the bars with their fingers to see if she were real, and she shrank away from them and hid her face in her hands. But the simpleton stared at her and did not laugh. Poor little mermaid, he thought. How horrible it must be for her in that cage, and how she must miss the sea. The parish priest was passing by, and when he saw the simpleton, he stopped. It is indeed a distressing thing to see you wasting your time gaping at worthless marvels, he said. But after reflection he added, though perhaps, for once, you are not spending your time entirely unprofitably, for the mermaids are an idle pagan race, who pass their days in sitting upon rocks and combing their hair, and now you see before you to what idleness and singing bring you. To what do they bring you, sir? Asked the simpleton. Why, indeed, replied the parish priest, just to this, to being set up here before a foolish crowd for the people to laugh and jeer at. Take heed of the warning. And he walked on. But the simpleton watched the mermaid, and he pitied her. And when the crowd had seen enough, and the people had drifted away, chattering and laughing, he went up to the rogue and said, Do you think it is quite kind to keep a mermaid on the dry land in a cage? The rogue stared at him in astonishment. Probably not, he said. Then why do you do it? Asked the youth. Would it not be better to let her go back to the sea where she belongs? The rogue burst out laughing. Why, what a simple fellow you must be, to be sure. That mermaid is worth her weight in gold to me, and I am not losing the chance of making good money with her help. Though, to be truthful, I find traveling around the country all the time can become a little tiring. Oh, money, said the simpleton, remembering all that his mother always said on the subject. Now I understand why you must keep her in a cage on dry land. The rogue laughed again. I'm glad you understand, my friend, he said. And now, if you would earn some money for yourself, stay by the cart and keep an eye upon the cage for me while I go to the inn, for I am hungry, and I will give you 2 silver pence when I return. So the simpleton waited with the cart while the rogue went to the inn, and as soon as he was alone, the simpleton lifted a corner of the black cloth over the cage and whispered into the darkness, Are you very unhappy, little mermaid? I am very unhappy, said the mermaid, and she began to weep. Do not cry, little mermaid. Tell me what I can do to help you. Carry me back to the sea, pleaded the mermaid. But I have never seen the sea, replied the simpleton, and I do not know where it is, save that it is many, many miles from here. Hold on a second, I have to get my dog in here. Hey, dog. My dog likes to sneak in and eat the cat food, which is for the cat. But I have never seen the sea, and I do not know where it is, save that it is many, many miles from here. The mermaid sobbed in her cage, and the simpleton thought hard. At last he exclaimed, Near here is a river. I have heard tell that eventually every river reaches the sea. If I put you into the river, could you find your way to the sea? I am sure that I could, said the mermaid. Now we must make our plans, said the simpleton. And it was arranged that he should go after dark to the inn stables where the mermaid was kept in her cage at night. And while the guests at the inn, with the rogue among them, were making merry over supper, he should unfasten the cage, carry off the mermaid, and take her to the river. But that evening, when he reached the stables, he could find neither the mermaid nor the cage, but only the donkey eating its hay, and the empty cart with the black cloth folded neatly upon it, and he had to go away alone. The next morning he learned that while the rogue had been showing the mermaid to the crowd on the previous afternoon, the rich count, who lived in the large house on the hill beside the town, had driven through the street in his carriage, and having seen the mermaid, he had a fancy to buy her for his new fish pool. He had offered the rogue 500 golden crowns for her, and being tired of traveling around the country, the rogue had accepted the high price, and now the mermaid was in the fish pool in the count's garden. Well, thought the simpleton, a fish pool is better than a cage, but all the same, I must go up there and see if she is happy." So the next moonlit night he climbed up the hill to the Count's house, and since the big gates were locked he had to find a way over the wall. He walked almost all around the grounds before he found a place where the ivy grew over the wall and he could climb up it into the garden. After a search he saw the pool gleaming cold and silver in the moonlight, and standing by it he called softly, "Little mermaid, are you there?" And she came swimming towards him. "Are you happy here?" asked the simpleton. "No," said the mermaid, "I want to return to the sea." "Then I will take you down to the river," said the simpleton. And he picked her up out of the pool. He had great difficulty in climbing back over the wall with the mermaid in his arms, but at last it was done, and he stood in the grass at the foot of the high wall. Then, carrying the mermaid carefully, he made his way down the hill. But she was heavy, and he was tired, so that it was daylight by the time that they reached the river. "You had best move, Cat, because I can't read my story if you stay there." "You had best go quickly, little mermaid," he said, and he slid down into the water. "Thank you, kind friend," she said. "Good luck be with you." And with a twist of her tail she was off, swimming down towards the sea. "What was that you put in the river?" asked a farmer who had been watching from across the field. "It was a mermaid," said the simpleton. "A mermaid? What nonsense!" said the farmer. And then he remembered something he had heard. "That would not be the mermaid which they say the Count has in his new fish pool, would it?" he inquired. The simpleton smiled. "She is not the Count's mermaid now, I am glad to say," and he walked off whistling. "This is something which should not be kept to myself," thought the farmer, and he strode off to the town to find the constable. Constable is like the police. So the simpleton was arrested and thrown into prison, and after a few days he was brought before the judge. The Count came to the courtroom and said, "I had invited all my friends to come and see my new fish pool with the mermaid in it, and when they arrived the mermaid was gone, and none of them believes that she was ever there. This rascal should be severely punished for causing me such embarrassment." The farmer said, "I saw him with my own two eyes putting the mermaid in the river." The simpleton's mother spoke. "He is a foolish, lazy boy, and he has been a bad son to me," she said. Said the parish priest, "I have always been grieved by his idle and thoughtless ways, but he would never heed my good advice, and now he has become a thief." One neighbor said, "He always was a good-for-nothing fellow," and another said, "He's not the fine, honest, hard-working man that his father was." And so they went on, one after another, and in all the town there was not found one person to say a single good word for the simpleton. And when they had all said their say, the judge looked very grave, serious, and sentenced the simpleton to be hanged for stealing the Count's property. So the simpleton went back to prison to await his execution, and his mother came to see him. "You are a wicked and undutiful son," she said, "and you have disgraced our good name. I should be well rid of you and your idle ways." The parish priest came to the prison and said, "This is what comes of associating with legendary creatures. You should have heeded my warning about that mermaid." The simpleton sat in his cell and waited, and one morning he heard a great twittering and commotion going on in the world outside. He carried his stool to the wall, and by standing tiptoe on it he could see out through the little barred window. "What is going on out there?" he asked. "The summer is nearly over, and autumn will soon be here," said a swallow. A swallow is a kind of bird. "And I and my friends are preparing to leave for the warmer lands." "Then good luck to you on your journey," said the simpleton. "Thank you indeed," said the swallow. "I shall be back here next spring, and I hope that I shall see you again," he added politely. "You will not see me again," said the simpleton, "for in 7 days they are going to hang me." "That is most unfortunate," exclaimed the swallow. "What have you done to deserve that?" "I stole a mermaid from the Count and put her into the river." "Stole a mermaid?" said the swallow. "How extraordinary!" And he flew off to tell his friends. When the swallows left, they flew over the land and right out to sea. The mermaids playing among the waves called to them, "Greetings to you, swallows! What wonders have you seen of the land this summer?" "In the prison of a town near a river there lies a young man. He is to be hanged for stealing a mermaid from a count and putting her in the river." "Why, sister, that sounds like your adventure," said the mermaids. But the little mermaid grew very pale. "How wicked men are," she said, and with a twist of her tail she was gone below the sea. She swam to the home of the chief magician of the sea and said to him, "Give me a shell which will contain just so much of the sea and the wind as I wish for my purpose." And he gave her a periwinkle shell. "I thank you," said the mermaid, and she swam away. Back in the town, when the 7th day was come, the simpleton was taken from the prison to be hanged. A great crowd had gathered in the market square where the scaffold had been set up, and when they saw the simpleton they shouted and mocked. The parish priest looked down at the crowd. "Now you see the truth of my warning," he said. "This is what comes of idleness and singing, that you are set up here before a foolish crowd for all the people to laugh and jeer at you, just as I said." "Indeed, sir," replied the simpleton, "you spoke truly. I remember your words." "Are you ready?" asked the hangman. "Quite ready, thank you," said the simpleton. At that moment a seagull flew low over the town, and at the feet of the simpleton he dropped a little periwinkle shell. "A present from the mermaid," he screeched, and flew away. The simpleton would have picked it up, but his hands were tied behind his back, and he could only look at it. He thought, "How kind of her to send me a gift, and how lucky that it came when it did. A few minutes later, and I would have not known about it." "A seashell," said the parish priest. "It is for that trifle, that little thing, that trifle, that you have given up your life? Are you not ashamed?" The hangman picked up the shell and held it above his head. "A present from a mermaid," he shouted. "Who wants a present from a mermaid?" And he tossed it contemptuously into the air several times and caught it again, while the crowd laughed and shouted delightedly. "Here you are, then," said the hangman, "a present from a mermaid. Catch!" And he flung the shell down to the crowd below. The instant the shell touched the ground, a thin stream of water and a little puff of wind came from it. In the twinkling of an eye the stream grew larger and the wind grew stronger, and before many seconds had passed the market square was awash with sea-water, and the waves were lapping round the scaffold. The people screamed and ran for their homes, and the waves followed them along the streets and into their houses. Soon only the simpleton was left. He made a great effort and broke the rope which bound his wrists. He came down from the scaffold, and the waves parted before him. He ran dry-footed across the square, through the deserted streets, and out into the country. There he stopped for breath. "What an extraordinary present," he said to himself. "Who would have thought so much water could be so small a shell?" And then he went on his way, singing, and was never seen in the town again, and you may be sure that the rest of his days he was very happy. But the sea-water stayed in the town for 7 days before it disappeared as suddenly as it had come. During that time no one could venture out of doors, and everyone had something spoiled by the flood, and a great deal of work to do afterwards, tidying up the mess. And in that town mothers still tell their children about the mermaid's present, and warn them always to be kind to creatures from the sea. The end. So that's our lesson. Be kind to creatures from the sea. Be kind to cats too. That's Mermaid and Simpleton.